Brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. We are back live in the studio. It is 2:00, and you know what that means. I'm sorry, it's Tuesday at 5:00, and you know what that means. It's FLA Law live on the radio. As you know,
that's what happens on Halloween night.
I know. My tongue gets all twisted up, doesn't it?
Happy Halloween to one and all.
Exactly. Happy Halloween to our listeners. We do not necessarily have a spooky show tonight, though. We're not talking about anything scary, but we do have a fun show lined up talking about all things pets law and pets rights. So it's going to be a great show. But of course, as you know, this is your live legal call-in talk show. We're here in the studios at WTAN, getting ready to spend the next hour answering your legal questions live on the radio. And as I mentioned briefly, we've got a great show lined up with a wonderful guest speaker who's in the studio with us tonight. Because as you know, we don't do pets rights and pets law. So we've got someone who is an expert on that area. She's pretty well known in this industry for that. I don't think I can name anybody else who does it. So she's created a pretty specialized niche for herself. And I'm excited for our listeners to be able to ask questions and, of course, just get some information from her in general. So before I introduce my speaker, I do want to give you guys all the info on how you can call into the studio tonight so that you can have your questions answered on the air. So as you know, it is 727-441-3000. That is the number that you need to call into the radio station tonight if you want to have your questions answered on the air. And of course, if you don't want to hear yourself on the air, you prefer to just leave a question virtually, then we do have our Facebook Live. We're streaming live on Facebook at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. We've tagged Attorney April Goodwin. So of course, if you want to leave a comment or reach out to her for a consultation, she's there. But of course, if you don't have Facebook and you don't want to call in, there's also YouTube. We've got a YouTube live stream as well. Search our firm name, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes, and you should be able to find our YouTube live stream and ask your questions over there as well. And then we'll respond. April and I can try to tackle whatever you throw at us tonight as they come in. So with that being said, let's introduce our speaker before we get to the question. I think we do already have a caller on the line. So caller, hang in there. We'll get to you in just a second. I just want to introduce our speaker tonight. Our guest is April Goodwin. She is not only a pets rights attorney, but she also does some employer rights. Is that right?
Correct.
Law as well. And she has an associate, Andrew, who's also working in other areas of law doing trademarks. So they have quite a robust practice of different practice areas. April started the Goodwin firm in 2015, which is in Largo presently, but maybe moving soon to downtown St. Pete. April is an Ohio native. She got her law degree from Ohio Northern University. She's licensed to practice in the state of Florida, of course, in all the federal district courts all over the state. And like I said, pets rights is her niche, but she also handles employer rights and representing pet professionals in their legal matters. So this is a pretty awesome show we've got tonight. April, go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners.
So yes, thank you. So we have been around since 2015. I guess we're coming up on 9 years, and just have grown. We are actually officially in downtown St. Pete.
Nice.
We haven't made a big announcement yet, but have changed all the addresses, so that's the important thing.
Cool.
And so we are just growing, and this is a growing area, and it's something that a few other attorneys do, but not a lot of them have a specialty or a niche, like you said, a focus in this area.
Right. Awesome. So then I'm going to go ahead and get to our caller before we dive in. And so I think we have Tetra from Clearwater who's holding on line one. Tetra, are you still there?
Yes.
Thank you so much for waiting. I appreciate your call. Go ahead with your question.
I have actually two questions.
Okay. Awesome.
So I want to get a little doggy, but I'm concerned that I'm not going to be able to afford the health care. Am I obligated under law to provide my dog health care?
You are obligated to care for your dog to the extent that, or any pet that you have taken responsibility for it. Your dog can't, you have to feed it, get it regular veterinary care. These are animal welfare laws. There are local ordinances, there are state laws where you must, if it is injured, you must be able to care for it and make sure it's not in pain. You don't have to do things like, it was diagnosed with cancer and now I have to get chemo. Like, even people get the right to decide whether they're going to do that or not.
Right.
You don't have to get it, the farmer's dog, whatever it is, the most expensive, dog food or anything like that, or go to doggy daycare all the time, but you have to be able to make sure its basic needs are getting met. And there are a lot of organizations that will help people do that. Sometimes even food banks have dog food that, you can go and get it there. But there's some resources online that tell you how much dog and cats in particular the care is over the course of their lives. And those are good resources if you can look those up, because it's always more than you think it's going to be, just like human kids.
Right. And I think there's obviously legal implications if you do not, care for your animal. There's protections and rights involved. And so you obviously don't want to put yourself in a position where you could be criminally charged for anything as far as neglecting or harming your animals. So definitely want to make sure that you are making a good decision when you decide you want to get a preferred baby, right?
Well, absolutely, yes. And it is animal control. The county animal control is going to have jurisdiction over that. And if they find out that you don't, you're not caring for the animal, they will, you will get cited. You could lose the animal. Like you said, Jackie, it could be criminal implications depending on the situation. So yes, absolutely.
All important things to think about, Tetra. You said you had another question as well?
Yes. But I'm not sure if you can answer it because this is a little bit different. It's not related to animals.
Okay.
I currently have a case with an attorney, not a doggy case, of course, but I'm not very happy with them. They never return my phone call, and they never respond to any of my emails.
Okay.
I was thinking about maybe possibly calling your law firm. How would I go about maybe transferring my case over to you guys?
Sure. So that does happen, unfortunately, more than you might think, where, the person is looking to hire new counsel. And so that is something that you obviously are well within your rights to do. Depending on the type of claim, if it's something that we handle, like personal injury or Social Security or workers' comp, those are handled on a contingency fee basis. So the agreement that you signed does, allow for you to transfer that to a new counsel. But basically, the new attorney, if it were our office or some other attorney, will have to resolve what could potentially be attorney fee lien from that attorney that you currently have. And so a lot of times what will happen is that our office or whomever will have to meet with that attorney at some point when the case resolves or settles and try to negotiate or, somehow work out that lien. But essentially, it's a very easy process. You or ourselves or whomever would just send a letter or a notice of some kind in writing that you no longer require the services of that attorney and that you have, opted to find alternate counsel. And that's simple as that. That is basically how that, relationship would end. The new attorney, if it's our office, would send a similar letter advising that firm that we've taken over representation and requesting a copy of the file. And then at the end, it's up to the attorneys to kind of work out the fee lien dispute, because that attorney is entitled to payment for the work that they've done so far. I don't know how long they've been representing you, but that is something that would obviously be an issue that need to be worked out between the two attorneys. Now, with that being said, it's always best to try to see if you can work it out with your lawyer, sit down, ask for an in-person meeting if possible, because there could be a reason why the communication isn't there. Maybe they're in trials and there's something going on. So it may be something that can be resolved, with your current attorney. Anything you want to add to that, April?
That's exactly it. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Yeah, so sometimes there's reasons for it. And of course, I don't know, the attorney don't want to, assume anything, but if you can sit down with your lawyer, that's always a good idea.
Okay. What is the number that I would call?
Sure. So if you want to reach out to our office number is 727-796-8282. Again, that's 727-796-8282. So you wouldn't call the radio station number, but that is how you reach us for any personal injury matters. And our website is voiceoftheinjured.com. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Tetra. Appreciate the questions. You have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. So the lines are still open. If you have your legal questions for myself or April, who's talking all about pets' rights tonight, that was a great question about what are your obligations when you're buying a pet. That's something that I didn't even necessarily think about, but it's true. You can't just neglect your pet. So
no, it is different. So pets are personal property under the law. But unlike, let's say, a car or a sofa where you can, take a baseball bat to your own property if that's what you choose to do. My grandfather did that to a computer one time, trying to destroy the hard drive because he was throwing it away.
Oh, gosh.
Something like that. You can't, animals, they're personal property, but they do have special protection even though they are personal property because they are living things and you take on this responsibility to take care of them. And that also comes with that liability as well. And that's where we usually come in is the liability of pet ownership and the disputes over pet ownership.
Exactly, which I can imagine, especially nowadays when pets are family to so many people, the disputes, I think, could start to get pretty intense in terms of custody issues or, who has rights to the pet or not. So I want to ask you more about that, but it looks like we do have another caller on the line. It looks like it's Jimmy from Perenich, Florida. Jimmy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm good.
Go ahead with your question.
Okay, first of all, happy Halloween, everybody.
Thank you.
Holiday, so I want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so my girlfriend and I recently split up, and we shared a dog.
Okay.
She has the dog right now, but I paid for it, and I have all the vet bills and documentation and things like that. How would a lawyer go about helping me in that situation?
Great question, Jimmy. April, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, so that's our bread and butter. Really, we don't. If people were married, that gets handled under a marital settlement agreement and things like that. But
That's
people
what I
who
was
aren't
thinking.
married, either they were together and not married, or they're family members or some other relationship, they would, that's where we would come in. So it's an ownership dispute. So really what it comes down to is if there is paperwork as to the purchase.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's adoption agreement, purchase paperwork, and usually from any kind of reputable breeder or rescue, you will have basically an agreement. And it's a purchase agreement, or maybe it's a bill of sale or something showing who was the actual pet owner. If that is determinative as to one person or the other, generally speaking, the courts go with them. Now, there are other things that go with that person who's on that form.
The document.
Right, if it's just one person. If there are other things, though, that, hey, I bought the dog, but everybody knows, and I've got texts, I've got witnesses that say this dog was a Christmas gift for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I say dog, sadly, people don't fight over cats as much. I think the cat chooses who the owner is, actually.
Yeah.
Or the cat is the owner.
The cat's in charge of that.
Exactly. But any kind of animal, this applies to. But they would have then, the court might look at, okay, is there any evidence of a transfer of ownership?
Right.
Again, same as if it was, this table or anything.
Mm-hmm.
What is our evidence that this ownership was transferred since the original purchase? If there's nobody on the purchase agreement, which happens sometimes, or no owner, I should say, or both of them are on there, then that's when things like who cares for the pet and things like that could come into play.
Like Jimmy's saying with the vet bills and all that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's evidence. We like to look at that. In the end, they do look at the ownership documents, but it's a harder argument when you've got to fight over those things, because none of those things, even your microchip, even your license from the county, are not determinative in and of themselves for ownership. So then you get into kind of he said, she said, and it's you have to argue with that. And the courts aren't going to do shared parenting with a pet.
Interesting.
They're not allowed to, actually. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I purchased the dog from Craigslist, and I don't have any like purchase agreement or paperwork like that, but I have the messages from Craigslist. I have them screenshotted about the transfer. I mean, I paid cash for it, but would that, you mentioned earlier, like messages about like a Christmas gift or something like that, would that be good enough to prove it?
I mean, it could be. That's good. That's better than not having them. It's better than them being, something in both of your names. If it's really, now text messages often, I think we all do this. We read what we want them to say, or maybe if you know the person you're texting back and forth with, their tone, so you know what that really meant. But the court's not going to have that context, and the court's not going to have that kind of bias and hoping it goes one way or the other and looking at the text message. So if they're clear and they're not open to interpretation, then that is better than if they're, oh, well, it's an emoji or it's, they said, oh, come and get your dog. Well, I was just joking, like, come and get your son or whatever, it was, well, yeah. Okay. So how a court looks at that might, be different, but yes, that is definitely better than, we have people who pay cash who the proof that they had it is an ATM receipt. Right. And that doesn't always go their way, sometimes. So it is, better, but if you can get a receipt, I mean, I know hindsight for you, 2020, but going forward, a clear agreement as to who is the owner. And if you do get it together, you can also do what we do, something called a pre-puptial agreement, where it's at the, and we also offer that for breeders and rescues to offer to their clients and their customers to sort this all out beforehand, because the court won't decide shared parenting, but if there's an agreement, they will. The more and more they're starting to enforce those. They didn't even used to want to get into that, but if it's an agreement that you have, they will enforce it. And it also helps you maybe avoid getting to the situation in the first place. Same thing with the prenup is supposed to do.
Yeah. So does that help, Jimmy? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it really does. I would like to set something up with your law firm. I tuned in a little late. How do I contact you guys?
Okay, so that would be April. So,
right, to contact the Goodwin firm, this is what we do. You can call our office at 727-316-5333. That's 727-316-5333. Or you can go to our website, which is Goodwin, GOODWIN -firm, FIRM.com. And you can click on, I think it's schedule or talk to us or something like that, big red button. Click on that and it'll take you to an online calendar and you can schedule right there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering my question. And
Thank
I'll definitely
you.
contact you.
Yes, good luck.
Thank you for calling in. So that does free up a line. We still have absolutely a lot of time here to go ahead and answer and ask questions. So go ahead and check us out. Looks like we've got a few viewers on Facebook, and we've obviously had some callers calling in. So keep it coming. The number again is 727-441-3000. Again, that's 727-441-3000. Call in. Get your questions answered tonight by April Goodwin. She is specializing in pets' rights, pretty much all things pet law that you might be interested in. So give us a call. We are answering those questions. We've had some great ones so far. So that's interesting. So since I know in marriage, in marital issues, you can have a prenup and then you can also have a postnup. So is that something possible where you can set out some sort of agreement after you've already purchased the animal to say this is how we're going to handle it and then enforce that later on?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And it's just like, so we also represent, pet businesses and employers and things. And just like in a business at the beginning, or, sometimes if it's a small business and you're all excited about getting a business started, you don't do it till later, but you want an agreement.
It's all roses
place.
In the beginning.
Yeah, that's when you want to do the agreement, right? You want to do it when you're all getting along, not when you're fighting, because what that is that's a roadmap for if you have any issues. This is, hey, well, it says this in the agreement.
Right.
And, and you want somebody, I think, just like you would in a prenup, that has actually also litigated these cases because we're the ones who see the problems, right? We're the ones who see like, oh, this is how it fell apart. Like you can tell a litigator's fee agreement is like 10 pages long, right? Because we've had all these problems come up and we notice stuff in there, right? So it's the same thing with any kind of agreement. We see things and we go, oh, you know what? We need to tweak this. And so we're constantly tweaking those. And obviously we tweak them to meet the needs and the desires of each individual, client as well. But that is, absolutely something. And it's something that, you think everybody's going to love each other forever. But, divorce lawyers are a thing for a reason. We're a thing for a reason.
Exactly.
Business attorneys who fight over businesses are a thing for a reason. So, yeah.
Exactly. Well, I have a question then to follow up to what Jimmy, you mentioned when Jimmy was talking. So when the couples are married or the individuals are actually going through a divorce, then that stays in the dissolution divorce realm. That's not something that you would necessarily handle, right?
No, I don't do family law for a reason. Yeah.
You and me both. Yeah. So if there's an animal dispute or pets dispute amongst those that are married, then that's something that the family law attorneys handle. Right.
I did get years ago involved in a case, let myself get talked into being involved in a case that was this dog was actually like a social media influencer. The dog was a star or whatever. Cool. And I was able to get involved at a certain point because the family law attorney had had enough and didn't want to deal with it. So I said, okay, fine. And then I soon remembered why I don't like doing that kind of law. And it's a different, no pun intended, animal procedurally and like a lot of things than what we do. But what I do is closer to what you do procedurally, than that. So, just leave that to the pros on that end. Yeah.
Amen. So then with an ownership or custody dispute, does it ever come down to some sort of monetary agreement? Like I'll give you the dog if you pay me X, or is it always you get the dog, I get the dog, and that's it?
It is. No. So you can just first of all, any agreement, if you're talking like an agreement, whether it's a settlement agreement after litigation or pre-litigation, but after the dispute has arisen, or an agreement you do beforehand, as long as it's not illegal. Mm-hmm. It's enforceable. So absolutely you can do that. We've had cases where our clients have either offered money to get to keep the dog or get the dog back. We have clients who have been offered money, because we will do either side of that type of law. And so, or type of case. So that is, it happens a lot. And we represent breeders a lot of times who have had issues with, they have guardians, they call them guardians or fosters, where they will have a breeding dog go and stay with a family rather than being in a kennel. Yeah. And sometimes those agreements go bad. And those are a lot easier to deal with sometimes because they are, asterisk there sometimes, because that's a business transaction.
That's a part of a business. Yeah. But less emotion involved. Yeah.
But we've had it even when it's exes. We've had it and a lot of money. A lot. It's amazing. It's amazingly, times when I've said don't pay that much money for this dog. Like, what are you? Right. I love it. It's cute. I get it. I would pay a lot. I feel like I would for my dog
for
too.
Chewbacca,
yeah, I would. But there's still,
there's a limit. Listen. Yeah.
And the nice thing with us though is if somebody's doing that, whether it's paying to settle or paying a lawyer or in it for the fight. Mm-hmm. These are people who care about the dog,
of course,
or cat or whatever it is. And so it's rare that even though sometimes, people want to argue best interest while he's working all the time, or I took the dog to the vet, or the dog likes me more, or whatever.
Is that a standard in pet rights?
It's not. Okay. It's actually, there's a case, Bennett v. Bennett. I forget which DCA it's out of. I want to say fifth. Mm-hmm. But that is, and it's a family law case, but where the DCA, and it's the law of the land in all of Florida, said, we've got enough to do fighting of deciding shared parenting and best interest with human kids. We're not doing it.
We're not doing it.
Yeah. Okay. So it would take a change in the statutes for that to be a thing with pets. And that's probably when I'll decide to retire. I'm not going to lie.
You got to set up guardian ad litem for the pets.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh. But it is nice. It is nice that it is a very rare occasion for us where we're dealing with, and we don't we don't take abuse cases for like animal control, but like that's what it would have to be. Like most of the time, there are people who maybe one is financially better or has more time, but they both love and care for the pet. So, and it's not going to need therapy because they're talking smack about the other parent, like with human kids.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. So you brought up a point, like sometimes the business agreement can go bad, like with a breeder or they're, maybe someone that's boarding the dog of some kind. So I just made me think of something like, what if I take my, dog, my hypothetical dog to like they have these pup resorts now, that where they can, stay there and be there while you're out of town or vacation, and the dog goes missing or someone steals it. Is that something that you handle or?
Right. Well, we might. So so pet theft is one thing that we do, and it goes kind of part and parcel with the custody/owner.
Okay.
Custody is my word. It's a marketing word. It's not a legal word, but
I like that word though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because that's how we think of them. So yeah, but it is. But with the pet ownership disputes, because in the end, that's really what it is. Law enforcement will get involved sometimes, especially if it's like a stranger type of situation, but not so much if it is people who know each other who are fighting over custody or ownership. But if it's strangers, sometimes law enforcement will get involved. But unfortunately, in order for us to get the pet back, you have to know who it is, where they are, and all of that. So sometimes we've had to use investigators to do that. But yes, absolutely. And then as far as like, is there any liability on the part of the pet business? There may be, and that's there, there could be insurance or something like that that can be investigated as well. Yeah.
What are your damages that you are looking at in a case like that? Well,
so that's I'm glad you brought that up. Again, they are personal property, even though they have some special considerations. But so essentially, whether it's a malpractice, like a veterinary malpractice, or your pet, unfortunately dies at a border or something like that. Not only do you have to prove that it was the fault of the company or the person you're suing, but you also have to prove your damages. And your damages are typically going to be the value of the pet, so like what you paid, and or maybe replacement value or something like that, and vet bills.
Right.
Reasonable vet bills. And so
you get all of the above, or you have to prove,
you can potentially get both, because you're out both.
Okay.
There is a case that says that it is like, there's an economic waste doctrine in negligence and property cases, meaning like, let's say I have a car that gets damaged and I can't, go and spend more money than the car's worth in fixing it up.
Sure.
But you can do that with pets. There's a case that says, yes, you can do that. It's reasonable to expect somebody who's going to spend $10,000, $20,000 in vet bills to save a pet, even if it's unsuccessful, versus, a pet that costs them $40 from the pound. That is, that is a reasonable expectation. So you can do that. To my knowledge, one of the highest veterinary malpractice verdicts was from a colleague, Marcy Lahart, in Central Florida, and she got $25,000.
Wow.
So it is, they're not, when you take, into consideration, it probably took her a couple of years to get that till you get to trial. You think about that. So those aren't cases a lot of times we take on because, unfortunately, it's just, it's not beneficial. And in all honesty, when people call us, they're upset, and I don't want to take advantage of that. So it's just really, not usually something we take on because it is, it ends up not being a financial sound decision, and they're doing it based on emotions, which we don't want to really get involved in.
Yeah. I could imagine, before we take a quick break for a commercial, but I could imagine that a lot of times the case is kind of like a cost benefit analysis you have to do, where it's like, well, the time, the money, the process that goes into it, then versus what you actually will get out of it. Sometimes it's not worth, what they're expecting it might be.
And that's any case. And again, like family law, it is similar in that case. When you're talking emotions, it's all emotional. I'm not saying I don't want to get involved with emotional people, but just I don't want to be where they're just so
that's
they're
all
not
it
saying
is.
reason.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I get it, but it's I don't want to be part of it. Yeah.
Okay, so I got a quick question. I said before we go to the break, we do this in auto and property damage with vehicles. is there such thing as a diminished value claim for a pet? And here's my example. Let's say it's a very thoroughbred or a show pet of some kind, and there is some sort of damage or malpractice or injury or something due to someone else's negligence that now makes this dog not as marketable or not as, agile or whatever the case may be, and they can't do what they used to do. Is there a diminished value claim for pets?
You could do something like that. Absolutely. Okay. So there's like we call intrinsic value, which is an increase in the value. So let's say this is, a legitimate service dog, like a seeing eye dog, or this is, my example I always use is like Lassie's grandchild or whatever, And,
the lineage.
Yeah, exactly. Or this dog is, famous and, you make money off of it, or a farm dog or something where you're making, it's bringing you an income or something like that. Then yes. And in that case, then that would be something that we would be able to look at.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. Well, it seems like that's a good time for us to take a quick commercial break. We're going to pause for about 2 minutes for commercials, and then we'll be right back with attorney April Goodwin to talk more about pets' rights here in the state of Florida. We'll be back here shortly on FLA Law and the radio.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
In 1955, the law firm now known as Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes made a decision. Instead of taking whatever cases came through their doors, they decided to focus specifically on personal injury. 64 years later, the law firm is one of Clearwater's longest-running personal injury firms. Available 24 hours a day with offices in Clearwater and throughout Tampa Bay, they're ready to put decades of experience to work for you if you or a loved one has been injured in a car accident or injured due to someone's negligence or recklessness. If you feel overwhelmed, uncertain, or unsure about your next steps after being involved in an accident or after a loved one sustained serious injuries due to someone else's negligence, call Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes at 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. That's 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. Non-attorney spokesman.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
That's right. We are back with FLA Law on the radio from the commercial break with April Goodwin from the Goodwin firm. She has been talking to all of our listeners tonight about pets' rights, touching on all things regarding animal law or pet law. And so we've got a lot more to dive into. But of course, if you have any specific questions about your scenario involving your animal, your pet, or something in that nature, feel free to give us a call. Of course, I can tackle any personal injury or workers' compensation, Social Security questions. If you have any of those tonight as well, feel free to give us a call about that. The number, once again, is 727-441-3000. We're still streaming live on our Facebook and YouTube channel, so go ahead and get the questions in that way as well. So we are just chugging right along, April. We've talked about some really interesting topics, but of course, I think another big topic are dog bites. So as you know, on the other side, we represent the injured and the ones that may have gotten bitten by dogs. And naturally, there has to be someone on the other side. And so you do the other side of that, which is the defense of the owners of the pets who may have bitten someone. So tell me about that. How do those cases get handled, and who is kind of an ideal person to come to you?
Right. So as you know, the first thing somebody should do is talk to their insurance company.
Absolutely.
If you're a homeowner or if you have renter's insurance, talk to your insurance company. If there is coverage, they will hire an attorney for you.
Right.
Some of them let you choose. If you want to choose us, that's fine. I used to represent insurance companies as a matter of course in a prior job. I don't love it, but I will do it if you really want us. That's a whole other show. But
that 6 minute increments of billing.
Yeah, exactly. Which we do that, which is fine, but it's the reports and but it is but really if you've done that and there's not coverage, then and that's as soon as somebody like makes a claim or a comment to you. You don't have to wait until you're sued or anything like that. Right away, call your insurance company. But more and more people, with the insurance issue here in Florida, there isn't coverage.
Exactly.
Or if it's a renter, they might not have renter's coverage, or if they do, they don't have.
Right. There's an exclusion for the dog. Yeah.
So those are, as you may know, strict liability. So what that means is that if you are the owner of a dog, the owner, you don't have to have been there. You don't have to have, you don't have to have done anything. You could not even be present at the time that it happens. But if you are an owner of the dog, you are responsible under Florida law for dog bites and injuries too. So it's not if your dog got scratched. The analysis there is a little different. Not your dog got scratched. If your dog scratched somebody, jumped on them and they fell and they, got injured that way. There's also liability there. So dog bite is stricter, but don't get, hung up on, they're claiming dog bite and they didn't really get bitten. That said, the severity of the injury, even though it's strict liability, does come into play. So what strictly liability means is you're the owner, you're responsible, your dog, bit somebody. There is the only defense really you have is comparative negligence, meaning if somebody, where we see it a lot is if somebody stuck their hand, into a fight. I said the only defense, I was wrong. There's another one. If you have a sign that says, bad dog, I don't remember the exact wording, but bad dog is the one.
So beware of dog, does that suffice?
It's an argument. It's not as good of an argument. The statute has the exact language. I think they want it to make it easy to read for kids.
Got it. Okay.
So, and we actually used to have one
beware that might be a little harder. Yeah.
Yeah. Bad or non-English speakers, So ours has a picture of a very vicious dog, like with blood coming from it. My dog is bad, but not for that reason. Like he just doesn't listen.
Not that kind of begs,
bad, but it's, I even have that because even though I'm not worried about my dog biting anyone, first of all, you never know.
Right.
And if they're provoked, that's contributory negligence. So there's that. And then there's also animal control that goes with that as well.
Right. Yeah. So that's something that you would recommend to listeners who own dogs if you feel that there might be some liability or issues with your dog, being a hyperactive dog or a bad dog or whatever, that they might want to have that kind of signage.
Honestly, I would have one if I had a dog. I have an Australian Shepherd. So he's 3 pounds. We just had him at the vet. I would have any dog that's not like a Chihuahua or something, which they actually bite. I think they're the biggest bites, or most dogs that bite the most. Oh. Yeah, Chihuahuas. I believe I just read that somewhere. Labs is another one too, but there's just because there's so many labs. But anyway, that is so if they're going to do some damage, I would have that sign. Regardless, now that gets like you for the mail carrier, the Amazon guy, things like that. You're at the dog park, the sign at your house isn't doing you any good.
Right.
You have somebody in your house who was your friend and is not anymore because now they're suing you. The sign doesn't necessarily do any good. But it does limit it some, and it's got to be prominent where people can see, and it's a deterrent too. It doesn't hurt that either. Yeah.
Okay. So then you're basically looking at, is there anything that you can use to put any comparative fault on the other party? And also, was there a sign of some kind that warned, so gave, a warning to the plaintiff or whatever?
Right. Yeah. Your dog got out and let someone out and got out and was at large is the legal term, running and ran across the street or to the street and bit somebody. Again, the sign on your door isn't going to, or on your fence or whatever, isn't going to do any good. So that is for people coming onto your property.
Right.
Obviously, and it's if they have a right to be there, they're trespassing or something like that on your property. The burglar, gets bitten, then, they will not win and they're lost. I was going to say they can't sue. Everybody can sue. Yeah.
Right. But they won't get very far.
Very far. Yeah.
So I got another question on Facebook, and this is from Rachel. It ties in right to what we're talking about right now. So Rachel asks, my dog bit someone a year ago. I paid a fine with animal control, but I just received a demand letter for a lot of money. Am I on the hook for that full amount?
Okay, so what we can do is even though we're saying, it's strict liability, a lot of what we do is negotiate that amount. Sometimes what we can do too is say, hey, there's no insurance here. and they go away because it's not worth it.
Right.
But what we can also do is negotiate the amount. So you may be liable for that full amount. You may not be. Demand letter, as is leaves room for negotiation.
It does.
Yes. So it's usually more than what it is, and it's to leave room for negotiation. When you're on the other side asking, I'm sure your clients have done plaintiff's work. I know they'll say ask for as much as you can,
exactly,
because you don't want to leave anything on the table. So I get it. So there is always room for negotiations. No, you're not responsible for that whole amount, and it's a demand letter. It's not a lawsuit. It's not. If you ignore it, you probably will get sued. But then it'll be up to the court to decide how much, or the jury to decide how much you get. Yeah.
And at that point, it's in the jury's hands. But prior to that, like April said, there's always opportunity to try to negotiate. And just like she said, on the plaintiff side and the injured party's perspective, we tend to send that demand letter for higher than what we think we can get, so that we give ourselves room to negotiate. So typically, when that demand letter goes out, you should assume that there's some room for resolution, unless something changes after that date. So let's say you got it yesterday and then they end up having a surgery the next day. Well, then that amount might change. But for the most part, you can assume that there's some room for resolution. So obviously, if you need April's help with that, Rachel, the number that she gave out earlier is 727-316-5333, right?
Yes.
That's the number that you can call if you are going through this issue, Rachel, and you need some assistance with your demand that you've gotten in the mail. But like Rachel said, sometimes if there's no coverage and different things, maybe the claim will go away. But if it's not going away, then definitely call April.
Right. And it's a you have certain, the demand letter probably is going to say you have 30 days to give us your insurance too. So again, if you have that insurance, you do that, comply with it, call your insurance company, make a claim. And if your insurance is like, no, you're on your own, then you can give us a call.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So Rachel, I hope that answered your question. So good. So we kind of touched on dog bite defense. But what if it's a situation where the dog bites another animal? It's not necessarily causing injuries to a person, but to another pet.
Right. So that is something that generally we would not get we would get involved on the defense side of that as well. On the side of the pet owner who's dog or cat or whatever it is got bitten, kind of the same thing I said earlier with the malpractice and the dog, the pet being injured. We tend not to take those because they're not very high value claim. We charge by the hour.
Yeah.
So my joke is I'm not taking a third of your dog, or if I did, it'd be the front third, not the back third. But we don't do that. So so again, it's weird. I was talking to somebody about how we're like one of the few professions, despite what people think about us, where we actually a lot of times talk people out of, hiring
doesn't make
us.
sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. The waitress is not going to tell you that, the food's bad. She's going to, even if it is, but we'll tell you like, no, this doesn't make sense, because at least me, I don't want to be that kind of lawyer. So I won't do that. Even if you're emotional and you say, now no, money isn't an object. I know it will be later when you calm down.
Yeah.
So, but if you're the one getting sued because your dog did that to somebody, we will take that on. It's probably going to be a small claims case, which, again, is, tough. We may talk, if you just want to talk to us and do a consult or have us hold your hand a little bit and talk you through that if it's not worth it to you, but again, like you said, it's a cost benefit analysis a lot of times.
Yeah.
But animal control will get involved in that. And sometimes you do want to defend that for animal control.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So that's a great segue. So a lot of times pet owners get animal control violations or, some sort of, I guess, citation of some kind involving their pet. They get that notice in the mail. Is that something that they can reach out to you to assist with?
Yeah, absolutely. So animal control is, first of all, there's different types of violations. One of the most common ones is animal at large. That's your pet was out running around. Pay that fine, move on. Yeah,
okay.
Honestly, our consultation fee isn't even worth that.
Okay.
So just pay it, because it is it's not enhanceable. You can have 100 of those, and they might watch you a little bit more, but it's not gonna, your dog's not gonna be declared dangerous, provided, of course, you don't, your dog doesn't do anything to anybody.
Right.
But when there are different counties at different levels of working up to dangerous dog, some just start with dangerous dog, which is a Florida statute, which comes with it. Your dog can be euthanized as part of that. Your dog can be But if they're not, then they can have all these restrictions that come along with it. And it's kind of like, even at that point, like they have to wear a muzzle all the time. You have to have a sign. You have to have all these things. You can't take them to a dog park. But then the next time, even if it's another pet that they bite, not another person, there could be, that could be euthanasia at that point. So you want to not have that mark against them. Right. Now, if it's a matter of another animal that they attacked, or it doesn't rise to the level of dangerous dog, which is the severity of the injury a lot of times, then, for example, Hillsborough County has a vicious dog. Other counties have aggressive dog. And those can be, they're not the dangerous dog, but again, they can be a mark against you. And dangerous dog can rise to the level of being criminal as well.
Really?
Like if you knowingly, it rises out of the stories, you don't hear about so much, but that, the story of the week, 10, 20 years ago of pit bull attacks, baby or their own owner and stuff like that. And so it's like people knew that this dog was vicious, and you do, and we have trainers who we know, who we refer to for people who have issues with that, and that can help mitigate your damages. Or help with animal control, and not dog bite defense so much in lawsuit, but
so
animal control.
Does animal control have like a procedure that's different than like maybe a small claims or circuit court, where you have to kind of present your arguments and go before a board? Like, how does that process work?
Right. So that is different in every county as well, because why have everything uniform? It makes us,
of course,
makes things fun.
That'd be too easy.
Yeah, exactly. So for example, in Pinellas and Hillsborough, it's more of a criminal site. It's like a speeding ticket.
Okay.
And most of them are like that. Sometimes, though, there are some counties where there is a board that animal control officers or the director of animal control actually hears those things. But the issue with the in Hillsborough and in Pinellas, usually it is like it's a judge, and like I said, it's like a traffic court judge. Hillsborough actually has an animal court.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for animal cases like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, if someone's getting slapped with a serious, violation of some kind that could result in a really bad ramification for their pet, they could contact you to try to see if there's any mitigating factors and things that can be done to avoid that violation.
Right. So and there is, for whatever reason, we get a lot more cases out of Hillsborough for this. Pinellas County maybe is not as aggressive in their enforcement of these things. And so we have relationships with the county attorneys who do these, and we are able to negotiate with them quite often into getting a resolution that our client can live with. It may not be completely dropped, but it may be at least get you to be able to not, your dog to live, and maybe the fine reduced, or maybe some, like I said, some training or something like that. And Hillsborough actually has a program where they will, your first time out will reduce, for the vicious dog, the fine for if you go to some training. So just things like that. But you do want to be aware of that it is anything where your dog has bitten another person or animal and you're getting charged with animal control has a possibility of, if there's a later one, it could escalate. A lot of these are neighbor disputes too. So keep that in mind of if you're having disputes with your neighbors, people make stuff up. So you don't want to have to deal with that.
Control. Yeah. Well, that actually brings me to one of my last and final points, because we're getting close to the end. So I don't want to go too long on here, but neighbors, homeowners associations, landlords, I could just imagine the number of issues that can come up with pets, and you're on a property and there's issues involving your pet, whether it's barking or digging up holes in the yard. I mean, I just think that there could be so many different issues. So what kind of issues do you really assist with when it comes to the landlords and homeowners associations and those kinds of disputes?
A lot of what we end up dealing with is service animals and emotional support animals, which again is its whole own show. And, we deal with that a lot. And my advice to anybody is, make sure that if you have a service animal or emotional support animal, get your documentation together in advance. Make sure it follows the law. Don't listen to your treating provider that the documentation follows the law. They don't. They're not lawyers. They don't
I can
necessarily know.
imagine that. Yeah. Well,
And
my
don't get it
doctor
off
gave
the
me
internet.
this. Yeah.
And have it be legitimate. We are advocates of legitimate emotional support animals, legitimate service animals, not people who want to take their dogs into Publix, and that's a whole other story.
Right.
But so if they're legitimate, then we want to help those people. But as far as other things, we do represent not an emotional support animal, not a service animal, having issues with condo associations, HOAs, things like that. And again, a lot of times that comes to negotiating. We've had people sell their houses because, the association was standing firm. Like family law, I don't do association law for a reason. But we do try to work closely with the association law attorneys and the associations to come to the best resolution. And sometimes it's just buying our client extra time to get out. They do have a lot of power in this state.
What kinds of issues do you normally see with the HOAs or the condo associations?
It's when the dog has attacked another dog, usually, or a person. But usually a person will be a dog. They'll be calling somebody like you.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, but usually it's another dog or a pet that they've attacked, or sometimes some of the laws are just menacing. The dog looked at them funny or is out too much.
Yeah,
and the associations do have a lot of power. So really, you live in an association in particular, whether it's homeowners or condo association. My recommendation is, if you have a pet that tends to get out or tends to bark, even if you think, my baby would never do that, get some training and get them. And again, we can refer to trainers. And a lot of times that's what ends up being too, okay, well, if they go and get training, and it works, meaning that the humans follow the training, then can we, this dog stay? And sometimes we're able to negotiate that too.
Right. And so when it comes down to a situation where there's no resolution, then it may be a situation where they're actually moving. And so
that's what we've had. I've had that happen more often than people give up their pets.
Really?
They will sell. Wow. Actually, I don't think I've ever had where people give up their pets. They've sold their place. Yeah.
Wow. So that's interesting. So I'd imagine then you kind of work with the real estate attorneys and try to figure out how to help your client get to move, and then you focus on just getting them out of there.
Right. And we it's kind of like a criminal defense attorney sometimes in that too. There are certain rights that the homeowners or renters for that matter have. And it's us, even though the law might not be on our side and for the final result, we are making sure that the other side is following the law.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, I know you also represent pet professionals who have pet businesses. So just before, we got like a 1-minute spiel on what you can do for those that maybe are going to the grooming business or a vet who's starting out their own practice. What is it that you can do for them?
Right. So we do, as you stated, we represent employers and employment. We do different types of business cases and like interference with your business, defamation, things like that, and also trademarks. So all of those also apply to pets, but the pet business too, sometimes. So we've represented boarders and groomers where a pet unfortunately has died in their care. And on the defense of that side, because maybe they didn't, again, have insurance or whatever, or the insurance didn't cover it. So that is, so we were able to do that as well. And again, like I said, just any kind of general business stuff. Yeah.
Good to know. Well, you've gotten the number. I'm going to give it to you again. If you want to talk to April more about your pets' right related matter, please reach out to her at 727-316-5333. And April, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. This has been pretty interesting. I don't personally own any pets, but now I know what I need to do when I get one, because I'm sure my kids are going to make us get one at some point. So thank you so much for joining us on FLA Law Live on the radio. We're here every Tuesday at 5. Tune in with your legal questions and we can answer them live on the air. Thank you, April. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good night, everybody. See you next Tuesday.